So now is the time of the podcast where Nick and I are going to talk about our favourite albums of the year. And we thought rather than doing like a best album of the year and a worst album of the year or a most disappointing album, we'll just do one where I suppose either it was an album which we didn't want or an album which we had like the most unexpected reaction to. So sort of biggest surprise, I suppose, in either direction. So Nick, please, let's talk about your favourite album of the year.
Right, considering how last year was an appalling year for things, right?
Yes.
Like this, just in general, everything in about 2016 was mostly awful. It actually was a really good year for music, I thought. Like I generally thought it was a really good year. We had another good album from Steve Mason. He did Meet the Humans. Poliça did United Crushers, which was a fantastic album. I had a new album from Melt Yourself Down, which is possibly the loudest band I've ever seen. Yeah, no, it was just a really good year for music. So it's tough to pick one out because even down to the fact that Three Trapped Tigers did another album, and you had the Skeleton Tree from Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, and you had another.
Yes, yeah, that I remember that caused like a lot of fuss with everyone, like all of my friends whose opinions I respect on music. Like everyone was like, "Oh my god, have you heard Skeleton Tree? You have to hear Skeleton Tree."
It's most notable aside from the fact that it's I don't know, it's just Nick Cave on form, but it's such an emotionally raw album because of the stories surrounding its creation. This Nick Cave's return to music and the way he's dealing with the death of his son.
Yes.
Who died in an accident in Brighton, fell off a cliff.
Oh, really? Oh, that's terrible.
Yeah, and so that's this sort of Nick Cave processing the event through this album, and so it's great. But I actually got an album for Christmas right at the last minute, which I've thoroughly enjoyed, which was an album by a band called PG Lost, who are a post-rock band that I'd never heard of prior to getting the album. Because you do that thing where somebody buys you an album and you've never heard of it, and you sort of look at it and go, "Oh, thanks."
I'll give this a try for sure. Don't have much choice now.
I'll like this, maybe. But no, I listened to it, and it's a thoroughly good album. The album is called Versus, in typical post-rock style. It's only got 7 tracks on it. I think the last one's like 20 minutes long, but it's a real classic style post-rock album.
What would you define as a classical post-rock album then, or post-rock in the classic sense? I was trying to describe what
post-rock is to a friend the other day, and that comes up a bit of a cropper, doesn't it? Because
it really does.
There are a lot of albums, there are a lot of bands even that are post-rock that bear no resemblance whatsoever to any other ones.
Okay.
Like I went to see 65 Days of Static.
Yes, I always think this is really strange. The whole idea of having like a local post-rock band, because they are from Leeds, right?
They're from Sheffield.
Oh, okay,
so
right.
They're a little bit down the road, but Vessels are from Leeds. They're our homegrown post-rock band. It's quite. The thing is, the reason I bring up 65 Days is because they don't like being called post-rock.
Yeah, a lot of bands don't. I think Sigur Rós don't like it, and Explosions in the Sky don't like it. But just to point this out, Nick and I live opposite ends of the country, and so Nick lives, in sort of Leeds, Sheffield. Your village is actually Normanton,
yes,
right?
It is. Yes, it's
So basically, Nick lives like 10 minutes away from Leeds on the train and can go and see these great bands. I live in the middle of nowhere, at the opposite end of the country. So the whole idea of having like a local post-rock band is kind of a bit alien to me. Well, but please carry on.
The really weird thing is that Leeds' music scene is really developing recently because there's always been so many good venues, but there have been venues for kind of smaller bands, and we've got larger bands coming in as well. I mean, a couple of weeks ago I went to see Oathbreaker, who are a Belgian metal band that I can't really describe what sort of metal they are, but it's just nice to see a real variety of music coming around. But what even was I talking about? Oh yes, so it's a real. If you're talking about defining what a classic style post-rock album is, it's just more stripped down rocky stuff. You know what I mean? It's rock music, but incredibly melodic and just a lot of noise, but really delicate sound. like a huge amount of delicate
Yeah.
sound, I suppose would be the best way to describe it. And that's what they do really well in their album Versus. Heed Your Loss, check it out.
Yeah, I always think that like because that's what post rock means. Like post is after rock, or like in some way sort of opposed to rock. I actually quite like the term anti rock. But yeah, I think in a lot of ways, like you listen to something like you listen to This Will Destroy You, or We Lost the Sea, or something like that, and it's like you are kind of right, because it's like rock music which has just kind of been broken down into its elements and then put back together in a different order. And I think that's what makes it kind of fascinating and so enduringly fascinating to me.
Well, it's like the idea of what post-punk was, because you had bands like the Stranglers follow on bands like the Sex Pistols and develop post-punk,
Sure.
which was taking punk language and then just rearranging it into something new and different.
Yeah, language. Yeah, language is important here. It is kind of it's the vocabulary of a particular genre, but kind of just rearranged, which is always kind of fascinating.
I really got into math rock recently.
I've never been able to do that. Could you okay, if I want to get into math rock, who would you recommend?
I have Battles, are a good band, and a band from Ireland called Adebisi Shank.
Right.
Which they've got a fantastic naming scheme for their albums. Their first album is called This Is an Album by Adebisi Shank. The second one is called This Is the Second Album by Adebisi Shank. And the third one is called This Is the Third Album by Adebisi Shank. So you're like, I see what you're doing here, I like it. But no, it's just this fiddly guitar music. So I always thought that there's a band called And So I Watch You From Afar. And
Yes.
I thought they would be classified as what would be a post-rock band, but apparently they're a math rock band, whatever that means. And basically it's just fiddly waves of guitar noise and things.
Yeah, I mean, there was another band whose name kind of escapes me now. Dillinger Escape Plan. Where I always sort of thought of them in that kind of mathy rock kind of genre.
It's just a really
and then you got bands.
band.
Yeah, and then you got bands like the Mars Volta as well, which is sort of way more prog than anything else. But they have that kind of those elements in there
I
as
love
well.
the Mars Volta so much, but I can't tell you what it is that they do. Like my favourite of their album is Amputecture, and it's just nutballs, really.
There's I can't remember what song it is, but there's a lyric which I just think is wonderful, where it's he's kind of whispering it, like you can always see that his lips are too close to the microphone, and it's like 25 snakes fall out your eyes, and I picture him standing there with like one of those clickers that bouncers at nightclubs have, to count how many people are there, and it's like, oh, one snake, click, two snakes, click, and it gets to like 24, and it's like, have you got any more? 25. Okay, you write it down, like, oh, 25 snakes.
Take the last snake from his eyes.
Okay, so your album of the year was just say it again.
Versus by PG Lost, available on Parlophone
Lovely.
Records. I don't know if it's available. I have no idea if it's available on Parlophone
It's
Records.
probably not on Parlophone.
It's probably.
So, yeah. Okay, so with that in mind, what was the album that either you wanted the least or had like the most unusual emotional reaction to? What was your biggest surprise
My
of this year?
biggest surprise of 2016 was the release of Black Star.
Yeah.
And that was my most unwanted album because because it was a goodbye album. It was the ultimate goodbye album, reinvented by my hero, and I didn't want him to release it because I just didn't want him to die. And you sort of, especially listening to Lazarus, listening to the songs on there, you can hear a frailty to his voice, the way he breathes in, the way he says certain things. There's a resolution to it. And you can just tell that it's I know I'm going to die, so here's my final goodbye. There's a bit in The Man Who Fell to Earth, right at the end, where Rip Torn's character, who is a teacher-type fellow, I think he's an engineer or a scientist. I've seen the film so many times, but I still don't totally... It's not that I don't get it, it's just that I just haven't taken it all in yet. But his character finally meets up with David Bowie again at the end of his... Rip Torn's old, David Bowie's still young. And he says... Because the character is an alien who's trapped on Earth at the very end, and he has recorded an album and the whole idea is that the album will eventually reach its home planet. It's sort of like a goodbye and I'm sorry type of thing, because the home planet is just, they're obsessed with picking up radio signals from Earth television. And he says to him, he's like, I listened to your album, I didn't really care for it. And he just snaps back at him, I didn't make it for you. And that's the sort of thing that I think, if people look at it and go, it's a too weird album, it's not made for you, it's a goodbye to the other aliens on Earth. And that's what I thought about it. I didn't want it to happen. I knew as soon as I heard it that there would never be any more David Bowie.
Sure,
yeah. Because he came out for his birthday and he died shortly after. But I knew that that it was a closing of a door, like the lowering of the last curtain when it was released, and I wasn't prepared for that.
It's always really strange with albums like that, which either are like the last album which the artist made, or are in some way incredibly personal, like Skeleton Tree, for example, and arguably Moonshaped Pool by Radiohead, which also came out last year. And Jeff Buckley's Grace, and also like Nick Drake, I suppose, for example. It's always really hard with those albums because they represent either like the last artistic statement of that musician, or because they deal with something which is very personal. It's almost difficult to appraise them as albums and kind of separate them from what they represent or the particular niche that they filled in those artists or in those artists' careers.
Yeah, I mean, it is a tough one, but I mean, I've never been more upset by someone's death more than I was actually upset by David Bowie's.
Really?
Yeah.
Not even by Leonard Cohen?
No, like Leonard Cohen. I mean, I think that by the time Leonard Cohen died, I was hardened by 2016 and was just ready for it. I was like, oh, another one, another hero taken. But just with David Bowie, it felt like so much. It just felt like too much. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It felt like, it felt like an insult.
Yeah, it did.
And there's some interesting like post-humanist kind of comment to be made there, where somebody who you never know and you've never met and interact with only through their media, and then they die, and you think, oh, that was a bad career move, or like that's disappointing,
Well, I was like, I just think that David Bowie was my introduction to music. I didn't really ever listen to music prior to getting into his stuff.
Sure.
Because I grew up in an environment surrounded by good quality music, I sort of took it for granted, and then I heard David Bowie.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, this is something utterly strange and different. A man whose voice is just so unique. I need to really listen to it. And I listened to it, and I got into music following on from that.
Sure. Well, that kind of actually leads on to my favorite album of the year, which you will not at all be surprised, because we recorded this before and none of it actually recorded. But Blonde by Frank Ocean is my album of the year, and I think there is a lot of. They're very different.
You're
different
entirely right.
actually,
your addition of that has just completely shelled my assertion that because that's an album that has affected the mainstream of music, if you think about it.
Sure, well, that's what I mean, and I think that there is kind of parallels between Blonde and something like Ziggy Stardust, for example.
Yeah.
Even though Blonde isn't technically a concept album, in a lot of ways it's actually a very unfocused album, in the sense that you listen to the tracks and sometimes it's a very ambient album, for one thing, which is also quite unusual. But for example, you listen to the tracks and you just think, okay, some of these textures seem to be in unusual places, and you'll have like one guitar line which is really hard in the left channel, and it's like it's really more prominent than everything else, and then you've got other melodies where you think, oh, surely that should be the hook, and it's kind of buried in this kind of sea of ambient kind of reverb. And yeah, it's just an endlessly fascinating album. I think it came out in August, and I was in the car coming home from somewhere, and Radio 1 had like a listening party for it, because the album had been delayed several times. I think it was supposed to come out originally in like 2013 or something. And I heard it and I was just like, oh yeah, okay, it's finally come out. Yeah, sure, I'll give this a listen. And to me, it was just one of those albums where you listen to it and you just think, okay, that's not only is that a really good album, but it's kind of changed how I think about music in some very profound way. In that I was working on my own EP at the time, and I immediately went home and just started moving stuff around and playing around with textures, because I just thought, I didn't realize you could do this. I didn't realize this was possible. And I think that's the effect that Bowie had on a lot of people as well. Not almost entirely because of his musical sort of experimentation, and more so because of his voice. And I think Frank Ocean kind of fills that kind of role quite well on Blonde. Well,
I mean, I think that maybe I've completely changed my position actually on the idea that there will never be any more. I said something and I instantly regretted how stupid it was, because I was thinking about how in the sort of theme of Frank Ocean's album, Childish Gambino released another one. He released his third album, which I want to say is called, it's actually his fourth album. Anyway, he released an album that completely changed him thematically and his direction.
Sure.
And really opened up experimentation in music in the mainstream, because that sort of thing, like Childish Gambino got played on Radio 2 the other day, and it's just like, that shouldn't.
Oh God, really?
Be happening, yeah, and it's been it was on Joe Wiley's show, so it wasn't like Ken Bruce is like, oh, and next up is Childish Gambino.
Yeah, but Joe Wiley's also transitioned from Radio 1 to Radio 2.
Yeah.
So I guess that's, I pictured Childish Gambino being played on like Steve Wright's Sunday Love Songs or something.
That, yeah. And then you also look at the fact that Beyonce released Lemonade this year.
Yes, Lemonade, which was a very close runner-up, I have to say.
Good album. Had collaborations on it between her and Father John Misty as well. He just writes on that album.
Yes, yeah.
So I'm just full of shit, Chris.
And Jack White also co-wrote one of the songs. Beyonce herself actually turned up on Blonde. She has, and not even in like a. And now we're going to have a guest spot by Beyonce. Like, she just has some backing vocals, and like if you didn't know it was her, you would never think to look it up.
So I think that realistically, we probably will never have creativity in a single person like we did with David Bowie, because he took a period of time when there was very little creativity, in the mainstream, and really revolutionized it from a perspective of gender and design and characterization,
and sexuality
and things like that. But at the same time, there's a whole community of people who are working together to do that now. So maybe it's just the way that living in a post-internet world, we don't need to do things individually. We can just collaborate and change our lives for the better or something. Download Tidal,
exactly.
Tidal, etc.
Well, I mean, in a way, you talk about sort of the collaborative kind of effort. That actually brings me on to the album which I wanted least this year, because no, and it's actually, it really hurts me to say this because I do really love this band, but The Wilderness by Explosions in the Sky was just such a horrible, crushing disappointment for me. And I think, and if we talk about Lemonade, and we talk about the collaborations there, and we talk about Blonde and all those collaborations, this, like, The Wilderness was almost like the opposite of that. It was very, very singular, and it really felt as if it had been completely butchered in editing. Everything that I love about this band was still there. Everything that's great about Explosions in the Sky was still great, but it just felt like everything was just in the wrong order. All the melodies were there, all the structure was there, and it was lovely, but it was all for nothing because I just couldn't get immersed in it. And it just felt like it'd been mixed and mastered in a really big hurry. And post-rock is, as we've talked about before, it's a genre which is completely made in the editing. It's made in the textures and the layers, and if you get that wrong, then there's just nothing there. It's just a mess. And unfortunately, much as I would have loved to have liked The Wilderness, it was one of my most anticipated albums of this year, and it just failed on almost every level, which is such a shame.
I like the fact that it's such a good year for music that that album came out and I didn't even really pay much attention to it. It came out and I was just like, there's so many other things I have to listen to.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I mean, maybe if you can get over the really jarring production values, then you might have a good time with it. But then it's like, one of my favorite Leonard Cohen albums is Death of a Ladies Man, and basically that was produced by Phil Spector, and has all the subtlety of you'd expect from all the subtlety you'd expect from somebody who was in prison for murdering his wife. And it's like, you hear these stories about it where, Leonard Cohen recorded like basic vocals, like guide tracks basically, and then Phil Spector stole all the tapes and just mixed it himself, and Leonard Cohen was like, but I haven't done the final vocals, and they wouldn't let him do the vocals again. And yet, like, that album is just a doo-wop nightmare. It's so horrifically badly produced.
Nightmare.
Pardon?
I used to play bass for doo-wop nightmare.
It's not a bad band name, but it's like, there is something weirdly fascinating about it, and maybe The Wilderness will go into that category for me. But I don't know. Certainly now, maybe I've just not had enough time with it. But certainly now, it really does still feel like a big disappointment.
I can't believe we went with the disappointments last, because it's sort of.
I know. I literally just thought that.
Well, that's a nice bump. Well, thanks a bunch, guys.
So recommendations. If you haven't checked out Blonde by Frank Ocean or Carol, the film with Rooney Mara and Cate Blanchett, those were my picks for this year. And Nick, just remind us of what your picks were.
I went. It was Rogue One was my movie of the year.
Yes, Rogue One was your film.
Because never before have I cried at a Star Wars movie. I'll try that again. Never before have I cried at a Star Wars film. However much I wanted to cry during Revenge of the Sith. It's not even the thing about the prequel films is it's so expected to knock them and it feels cheap and nasty. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm not.
It's sort of like, Jar Jar Binks
something
sucks,
I do.
and you don't know, and then everyone goes, "You're right," and you go, "I feel dirty inside."
It's such an easy thing to do, isn't it? Such a cheap shot. And your album of the year was
Versus by PG Lost.
Fabulous. Okay, so we're going to wrap this up now. Okay. We'll probably do another one of these in a couple of weeks maybe. And I very much hope you enjoyed it. And hopefully next time we will have a title and intro music and that kind of stuff.
Have you ever, by the way, just as a last final thought, have you ever used, Childish Gambino? That's a strange name, isn't it?
Yes.
Do you know how he got that name?
I have no idea.
He put his name into the wu-tang clan name generator, and it came up with Childish Gambino. So what I would like to do now is to put your name in and see what you should be called. So, by the way, just to let you know that my name is Thunderous Desperado.
Okay, that's good.
Okay. Which is pretty good. You, Christopher R. Moore, would be known as Rough Artist.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
Well, in that case, until next time, it's goodbye from me, Rough Artist, and it's goodbye from my friend Thunderous. What was it?
Desperado.
Thunderous Desperado.
I've also put in what should we call our podcast, and it says Expert Leader.
Expert Leader. All right. See you again for another episode of Expert Leader.
Expert Leader. Goodbye.
Thank you and goodbye.